Hey, let's get into this.
Is cancel culture killing your authenticity?
Do you think we have freedom of our voice anymore?
I don't actually think that we are free, and that's scary.
The guided words Bea Vasic is on an all-new intentional living, urging us to find our voice.
It's like you're kind of going against the stream of like regular consciousness. You have to pull away from that and come back to what actually feels true for you.
Stand strong in our convictions.
To me, there's no other way of doing it without consistently kind of feeling into what does it feel when I'm actually tapped into my voice.
And ultimately create a space to connect with your people.
We all have something to say. We all have a voice.
And the people who, resonate with that message, they deserve to hear that message too. We're supposed to find each other.
On an all-new intentional living with Courtney Meyers.
Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers, a podcast dedicated to those seeking a more fulfilled and purposeful life through thought-provoking conversation, spiritual exploration, and authentic connections. The intentional movement has begun, and if you found yourself here, you are a part of it. Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers starts now. Hi there. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. I am so excited we finally get to do this. We had to reschedule a couple times, but we get to connect today. So welcome.
I'm so excited. One of the things that I have to tell you is that when I first looked at your podcast, like the video portion that you post on Instagram, I was like, she is so my person. Like you are both like very fierce and like bold, but also like very warm and welcoming. Like you're like the type of person where you're like, oh my gosh, I could sit down and chat with you. But like at the same time, like you're not the type to like shy away from certain topics or like you really go in there and you're like, hey, let's get into this.
I love that. No, because I am. It's like, let's just go in. I like the deep conversations. Like, let's have it and let's not shy away from it. Let's talk about everything. So I love, oh my goodness. Thank you so much. That was such a compliment. I love that you saw me because that is part of the work here is being seen for who we are. And it's been a journey for me. And I know even for you probably, and finding your voice and stepping into that authentic version of yourself, it's not easy. So actually, I know we're not supposed to need the validation, but the fact that you said that gave me that validation that, okay, maybe I'm doing something right. So one, thank you. And two, like, how do we do that? I don't even know how I did it. So how do you do it?
I feel like, well, just in terms of like seeing you, I feel like I'm generally perceptive, I think, but also you're the type of person I think where, I'm sure there's so many layers underneath, but like you have an energy about you, I think that is quite big. Like, I don't know if you've been told that previously at all, but you have, I think, a large kind of like, it's like very, it's expansive. Like, it's just like, I can feel that you're kind of like me. We're kind of like Energizer buddies. When you put them together, it's like, there's so much energy. And like, I'm sure you have like a lot of ideas as well. So like, you're kind of like, it's difficult almost for you to be like one idea, one thing to focus on because you're so energetic. And so like, I feel like, ideas, pings, things are probably coming to you all the time. I mean, you can let me know if I'm spot on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, is that what it's like for you? I know because you're a writer. It's interesting because, you're a writer and you're a lawyer. So you're in like these two very like extreme worlds. Whereas like, as a writer myself, it's like you are always constantly getting these downloads and these creative, and it's like you need to have that release. I even tried to be a stay-at-home mom for a couple of minutes and that didn't work so well. Like I'm just like, I have to be creating. I have to do something with all of these, like you said, all these ideas that are coming in. And if it's not like, okay, I can only redecorate my house so many times. What am I going to do next? It's like we have to keep creating. And so, I mean, it's really interesting how that works. So how does it work for you, especially combining such like the masculine, logical world with the creative, like intuitive hit world?
So the logical world was driving me nuts, which is why this whole side was born in the first place. Because I think generally, I was the type of person, I've always been the type of person where I'm like very creative. There's a side of me that's like very creative, very flowy. Don't give me any structure. Creatives often will be like that. And like I thrive in my feminine and like receiving and all that good stuff. And then there's like, I think, there was a lot of different reasons why I wanted to become a lawyer, but like so many of the things that I was learning like on that path, like getting there were things that I had to very much unlearn and like kind of, separate those two and like I find they bled one into the other. Like I think that being like a lawyer, I actually really benefit from like my creative side when it comes to like solving problems and like thinking of ways that, like we can execute certain things. And then to not drive me absolutely nuts is the creative side where, like you said, like we have so many ideas, you and I. And so it's just like, I need to put it out there. I need to like channel that energy somewhere. And for a long time, like I wasn't doing it because like, I kind of wrote for myself and like that was always a part of my life. Then people were like, oh, you're such a good writer. But what they meant was like in the academic sense, like you're so great at writing essays. You're so great at writing this, that, and the other. And so I remember always in school being praised for like how good of a writer I was on that front. And like, I think that like, because I was never really encouraged on the creative side, like that was something where I was like, oh, I'm really good at this. It makes me happy. And look, people praise me. I get this external validation from people for, the way that, that translates into academic writing. I'm so good at articulating things. And so I can literally see when I look back at like high school and like as I went through university, it was always, oh, this is good if you turn it into this, like I remember having certain conversations in high school with friends where I was like, I really love writing. I'm not sure, like, I've always thought of this path as like a lawyer, but like, I'm not sure what that entails. And I really love like the creative part of it. And I had a friend that I remember said to me, you're so smart. Why would you waste that? And I literally remember this conversation because that's such a theme in my life where it was like your creativity, and like maybe we'll talk about this when it comes to authenticity too. Your creativity is accepted when you're a kid and like encouraged. And then at a certain point, well, if it's like packaged in this neat way that like society approves of, then like you can continue to spend time on this. Otherwise, it's kind of a waste of time and a waste of your intellect. And I think that was something that like I had heard a lot and it kind of really was indoctrinated in my brain. It's like, well, you're so smart. Why wouldn't you, go pursue something as if, writing was not this exercise that, required any brain cells. So I don't know if you, had experiences with that narrative. I know a lot of creatives have.
Well, it's funny that you're saying this because it's like, I wanted to be a lawyer. But it was like everyone hates like being a lawyer, so don't do it. And I even took some pre-law classes in college, and I was one of those people that didn't have to study very much. I was lucky in that. Like if I read something, it'd be great, but I could write. And if you could write, you can write your way into an A. You could write your way out of anything. And anyone that says that you're not smart, I don't know why people think everyone and their brother is going to say, oh, I want to write a book, or I'm going to write a book someday, or I could do this. Like, no. Well, I take that back. Everyone can write given direction, but there is a skill and there is a lot of intelligence that goes behind it. But when it comes to us easily, like you, it's this natural state. It's like you go into this flow state. And I know to me, that's when I connect most to my spirit. It just comes out. I don't think about it. And I think that's what's interesting is what you said is like when you were younger, you loved doing it. And we always come back to that. And I think that's what we need to do to tap into our authenticity and into our spirit. And what really lights us up throughout any of our life is remembering what we loved when we were younger. I loved to write too. I would write books. I would read puzzles, like anything that was in that creative pursuit of still putting something together. And writing's almost like a puzzle. You're like bringing something together.
No, it's true. And it's also play. Like,
Yeah.
it's something that we like to do, but it's also like something that when you're in like that playful state and you're not taking things
Yes.
super seriously, and like, you know what we're like when we take something serious and we're like, I need to work so hard at this, and I need to like strangle almost all the life force, all the creative force out of the project. And that's where you go wrong. That's always where you go wrong. Where it's just like, then you're kind of like you were saying, like you're almost expanded outside of yourself. Like a force almost takes over that's not even you, but it is you. And you're just kind of this vessel that kind of takes it in and puts it out into the world. But it's just like when we're not willing to like open ourselves up to like that, that childlike, I guess, like energy and presence that we have when we're kids, we're so present, right? Like you're playing, you're going outside, you're curious, you're like in discovery mode. And so it's just like the world is kind of always pouring into you as you're like, and you're just picking it up like a sponge, and like you're so in your experiences versus I feel like as you get older, like you actually have to consciously come back to that practice.
Yeah. Why is that? I mean, I've talked about it on the show a million times. And being a mom of two very little kids, I mean, I'm sure people that listen and watch at this point are so tired of hearing me talk about them. But the fact is they are just so naturally present. Children are. They don't think about it. They're just in the moment. They are the most spiritual beings out there. And we get so conditioned by society, just like you said, that one comment, that one conversation from your friend shaped the way you like looked at your career and your life and your trajectory. If that conversation didn't happen, would you have gone to law school? I don't know. I mean, I went to journalism school because everyone told me you can speak, you ask a lot of questions, you like to be in front of all these things, which led me onto the path that I'm on now. And I'm thankful for it. And I went into my career, which led me to where I am now. I learned all these skills I needed to learn. So I don't think anything's a mistake. I don't think you're a lawyer by mistake. But if that conversation doesn't happen, does that change the trajectory? Or would you have pursued writing sooner? I don't know.
You know what? I think going back to writing was a choice, but that I think the path to becoming a lawyer, like it's not even like one comment almost. It's like you're kind of being shaped and molded and brainwashed a little bit on a daily basis. You know what I mean? Like it's not one person. It's not like one teacher. I mean, like, sometimes you'll have interactions that like stick out to you forever.
Yeah.
But like you're on a daily basis, I feel like you're having these conversations that like are always pushing you away from your authenticity, right? Like, even when people tell you to be yourself, it's like, oh, be yourself to an extent, to an extent. Be yourself, but also don't do any of these things that like turn people off, basically. Don't talk about this. Don't talk about that. Don't say this, like. So it's one of those things where like, for me, I think coming back to my creativity was very much like, there was nobody who was like, oh my God, you should like pursue this. This was like an active choice on my behalf that I think would have happened no matter what. And I think a lot of times timing is like very interesting because it's just like, there are certain things where like when I look at like the timeline of it, like so many things aligned and like opportunities and things that kind of just pushed me forward in like in a path that like I didn't actually know like where it was going. Like I couldn't have even imagined this. And so I think it's like, it's one of those things where, on the one hand, you're being molded by like, I guess, what, general culture, general society, like the rules of what it means to, succeed and what you should pursue and what is safe and this, that, and the other. And like you said, I don't think anything is ever a mistake. I think like there's so many things that you're like learning and unlearning along the way. And like that makes you, right? Like that makes you who you are, even in the creative pursuits. And so when I look at it, it's just like, it's your choice and it's my choice to come back to the creative things that like set us on fire, right? Like, it's like, even when nobody's clapping for you, like nobody clapped for me when I, started to like write and post and like share with the world. Nobody was like, "Go, good job. Oh my God. Like, keep going, sweetie. You're doing great." Like nobody was doing that for me. It was like very self-led in that way where I was like, okay, this is something that feels like it's missing. Intuitively, this feels like something that, is a part of me that's feeling like it's missing for a while. And then you go into these things and you start kind of following like little intuitive nudges as you go. And all of a sudden, this greater path kind of unfolds. But like it's like you're kind of going against the stream of like regular consciousness almost. Like it's like this is the path that most people say, and like the views that are like maybe dominant or beliefs that are held by people. And then there's like, well, what do you think for you? Like what actually feels true for you? And then like coming back to that. And like, I don't know if you've like had that as well, like consistently throughout your life, where it's just like, you have to pull away from that and come back to what actually feels true for you.
Well, I think you've said so many big things there. One is like that, like no one is cheering you on a lot of the times when you're doing something that is for you, which is weird. It's like we get that praise, we get that support, we get that cheering on when we're going down that path that other people in your life think is right or is safe or is productive. But then, we all have that in ourselves. We all have our intuition. We all have our spirit, that nagging feeling that like, something's not, or we're just not feeling fulfilled. That is a sign to like, okay, what really lights you up? And then we have to push ourselves. Like you said, no one's sitting there clapping. Yeah, you're posting. Yeah, you're going to publish your own book. I mean, we don't get that. It's so funny. I got so much more praise for doing what I did in Hollywood or having my children or things like that than going out and being an entrepreneur and doing my own thing and following my passion and really stepping into my own. And that's why I think it's also hard to find our voice and be authentic in it, because we're not always going to be supported by everyone that we want that support from. It's a lonely journey. It's a scary journey, and it's a vulnerable journey because, people want to see you be yourself within this little box. It's like, be yourself until this, like you said, you can be yourself in these certain ways, but don't be too much. And there's a lot of that goes into it. And I think we're all kind of boxed into our own little persona, what we're supposed to be. And we grow out of that box. Let's hope we grow out of that box.
I don't know if you've noticed, but people give like a lot of flack to like the people offline in their life who are like in some way, shape, or form not supportive of them. Like I think there's so many trends with people being like, oh, I started my account with a few hundred followers and my family or whoever, somebody in their life said like, oh, that's like a waste of your time or something. And then they were like, hey, like I grew it into this thing with this business, this podcast, this beautiful thing. But I also find that people don't look at how many influences we have online as well that are like, well, just really like, I find like it's a bombardment almost of the rules of like how to do the online space correctly, how, and it's just like, if you're not doing this, posting this many times a week, doing this, that, and the other, are you even like an entrepreneur? Are you even this, that, or the other? And like, I don't know if you've noticed it as well, but it's just like, it was like so many people kind of wanted to break away from like, they're like, oh, I wanted to like free myself, whether in their self-expression or whatever it is on the internet. And then you're kind of given new chains, like, it's like, these are the rules. And, like, do this, do that. And you're like constantly bombarded with this.
Yeah. There's a lot of like unspoken rules just in general. And I feel like when you are a flowy person or someone that wants to be a creative, like you have to, we come up against these rules and it's like, do we want to play or are we going to do something different? And if we do something different, are we going to be accepted? And so it's like that internal struggle. Like, how do you balance that? Like, how do you really stand in your power and your voice and do it the way you want to do it versus what the status quo is doing? And sometimes the status quo, there's something to it. If someone's already done it and like made it easier, why do you have to reinvent the wheel? I agree with that. And then I also see the people that are just like trying to do it in their own way completely just because they want to be different. I think there's a happy medium, but like, how do we get there? How do we get comfortable in any part of our life? Just like really understanding what feels right to us.
For me, and I don't know that I recommend this approach for everybody, I think doing the wrong thing and doing the thing that feels really icky for you is actually very helpful. Because when you have experienced that uncomfortable feeling of either on one occasion or on multiple occasions, doing something that feels inauthentic for you and getting that like pit in your stomach where you're just like this, and like there is something to be said for things that feel uncomfortable because you're trying something new, right? Like when something is foreign, you're learning a new skill, you're doing something. Yeah, maybe the first time you go and like, you get in front of the camera or you write something and you post it, it's going to maybe feel uncomfortable. And I think that's normal. But when you start feeling like this gross feeling in that, like, in your body when you're being true to yourself and when you're doing something, because like you can see something that's helpful for you and it's like super awesome, and then like take it and also make it Courtney in your execution. You're like, this is still me. There's still me in this, versus when you're like just taking things on that are somebody else's and they don't feel good in any way when you try them on. Like, and so being able to kind of discern and differentiate as you go, what is that good feeling that I get when I am being true to myself, when I am doing things in a way that's still in alignment for me, right? Versus what does it feel like when I am depleting myself, trying to be like somebody else because I'm actually just subconsciously comparing myself to someone else. And I see them having something I want. And so I feel like, oh, the way that I am isn't enough. So I need to go do it like them because they are enough, because they have the thing. And so I need to be like that in order to get what I want.
I love that you said that because I know how you show up. Like, let's talk about social media. The way you show up on social media, you do a lot of posts, you do a lot of writing, but you're not always doing the walk and talks and this, like you're not doing all these things that you're supposed to be doing. And I've had so many people tell me, you just need to turn on the camera and show up and like do a walk and talk. And I do it. And I'm just kind of like, it just doesn't feel right. I've done like it once or twice where I really like was passionate about what I was talking. When you're like in it, when you're in that zone and you really feel it, but then most of the time it's like feels contrived. I'm like, that's not me. But everyone's like, that's what they want to see. I'm like, but it's not me. So now we're going to curate. Yeah. Now you're going to curate these moments to be like everyone else. And I don't see the benefit in that in any which way. I think we all do need that space to just show up as ourselves. And you're right. You feel it in your body. I was nervous the first couple of times I started this podcast interviewing people. My husband and I used to like call it the pre-game. I'd have to go to the bathroom for a little bit and come, and then be like, okay, I'm okay. I can do this. He's taking these deep breaths and like so nervous. And now it's like, okay, we got to jump on, turn the camera on, let's go. I don't think about it. That's what you're saying is like, yes, there's going to be that scared moment here and there if it's something new. Do it a couple of times and you'll be fine. But like, let's not push ourselves to be outside. It's not even being outside of our comfort zone to do something that's not authentic to ourselves. That's what it is, because getting uncomfortable is good. It's being inauthentic that feels wrong.
It's exactly that. And the way that we talked about, the few minutes before we jumped on, the way that you do this is very particular to you, right? Like the way that you welcome people, the way that like your conversations flow. Would it feel the same if you were following a script, for example? If you were like, hey, I'm going to script everything out and I'm going to send you a script and then we're going to go back and forth like this is a high school presentation. Like that wouldn't feel good for you, right?
No.
Like that wouldn't feel like expansive and like you're connecting to the person that you're speaking to and connecting with the people who are going to listen. Like you did this thing that, in the beginning was uncomfortable, but you also took it and you made it your own. You made it this whole thing that you're like, this screams me. This podcast is me. This is how I connect. this is what I care about. These are the types of conversations I want to be having. Like we're having a very particular kind of conversation. I'm not talking to you about, I don't know, like reptiles. It's a random thing to think about, but like you have the conversations that like, you know, drive you and make you excited. And like, that's all coming from you, right? Like you're setting the tone for everything. You made this your own beautiful, you know, living, breathing thing. And so like, that's what happens when you take something and you run with it authentically, right? Like you're all up in this. All your fingerprints are all over it. And so it's just like, it's the conversations you care about. You pick people that like energetically you jive with, like so many things, right? That are all coming from, they're like led by you. And so it's just like, but if you did it any other way and you were talking about maybe, I don't know, topics you thought you should talk about, like, I don't know, The Bachelor, like, I don't know what. It's just like it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't have the same impact. It wouldn't have the same result. And like you wouldn't feel the same way when you're doing it, right? Because kind of coming off of what we were talking about like nobody clapping for you, because nobody claps for you, you have to have something that you really care about, right? Like something that really drives you, because you're going to have, especially in the beginning, you know, some low moments or times where maybe you're not feeling as motivated. But when you're doing it from a place of authenticity, but also something you really care about, then you can keep going through those moments. But if you don't really care about what you're doing, or if it feels super inauthentic, then when those moments kind of come up, like a lot of people stop before they even start, right? Like when we're talking about writing a book, I was shocked. I don't remember who sent me this stat when they were congratulating me on the book. They were like, it was like 95% of people who start writing a book don't finish ever. And I was like, really? It's that high? Like,
I actually think it's higher than that. I think it's like only 3% actually finish their book, and like 1 or 2% publish it or something. Like it's
it's surprised.
Like, yeah.
To like not even finish it. But that's what it is, right? Where it's just like, if there's something hard, or like maybe, I'm not saying like all of these people, it's because they didn't care about what they're, but sometimes if you don't care enough, if you don't have that like thing that's really driving you forward, and you're like doing something that you think you should be doing.
Yes.
That's when it gets like you need so much more motivation, and you procrastinate so much more, because it's not coming from that place within you that like has that internal extra drive, when the outside world is not clapping for you and nobody's saying, oh my God, you finished a page. Good job. Next page. Good job. Next page.
I mean, that's the thing is, I think I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think should is like an unofficial, not really totally 4-letter word. I know it's not a 4-letter word, but it should be a 4-letter word, because it's the shoulds in life that are killing us. It's when we do what we should do is when I find we're not following our spirit, when we're not in the energy of our purpose. And that's exactly what you're talking about. I don't think it needs to be some long drawn out process to understand or find our purpose. It's those things that fuel us, those things that light us up, those things that bring us energy. It's why you found yourself coming back to the creative pursuit of writing. Not that you weren't writing in your legal career, but just coming back to find that energy there that probably helps propel you in your day job, you know, versus that's what will drive you to finish that book. I'm about to write my 4th book. I mean, I ghost write a lot. So, you know, It's like, a lot of people. Yeah. There has to be something in there to propel you forward. It's not easy in the way of, it's daunting. Yeah, it gets exciting, but then you get just like life, you get in the nitty gritty of the book, that middle, it's like, okay, how are we going to get here? How are we going to push through? And it's like, you gotta like find something in you. There has to be a drive, and that is your purpose. And that is where I think that energy comes in.
And you know what really gets us? It's the overthinking. I don't know how many people have messaged me and like, I'm going to write a book, or I want to write a book. Yeah. But it feels like And like, they're the type of people where I see they're like creating all this content on a daily basis. You know, they're like almost a content machine. And then they tell me, well, I have nothing to write about. And I was like, what? What do you mean you have nothing to write about? Well, nothing that's like worthy, you know, like of being in print, right? Like, you know, like this very big difference between, and like, while, you know, maybe you don't want to write your like complete stream of consciousness and put it out into the world, fine, okay. But like, don't tell me there's nothing there that you can turn into something that you would want to put out into the world or that you would be proud of. And it's just like this almost like snooty standard, right? Where it's just like,
Yeah.
well, it's okay for social media and for, you know, the online world to consume, but I could never, like, I have no good idea. Is basically what kind of like they were telling me. And I was like, isn't that interesting that like it's tiered, like the way that we judge our creativity? Oh, this is good for this. Or some people, it's like, oh, this is good for just me, but like none of it will ever see the light of day. Not online, not friends, not family, no one. And it's just like, so many people that I've spoken to about this were like, you know, they're like, oh, but I cannot write. I could never be a writer. And I was like, it seems like you're quite drawn to it. And they're like, no, but like, it's not Shakespearean. All right. Like there's this conception of what worthy creations look like.
Well, and I would argue to anyone out there that says that, like, you're wrong. I actually wrote a full book off of posts that I did. I literally took all of my posts, gathered them together, and then found the theme and wrote it. Now, I haven't published that book yet because it's very personal. I have to get up the courage to put that one out there. But, you know, I've done it for other people. I've taken years worth of teachings and trainings, and you just get like, if you can do it online, just start there in those bite-sized pieces. Or if it's your journal just for yourself, I've coached writers that same way. If you are just write in your journal, whatever you did, you will find the theme. We will group them together. It is there. And I think we do get in our head about like what this book needs to be or what the theme needs to be. I mean, you know, I always joked around as a child. I wanted to be the next Jane Austen. I loved her books, you know, and or the next great American novelist. And you know what? I don't need to be them. That's not me. That's not my writing, and that's okay. And I think there's room for everyone, and we have to, if we're drawn to it, then there's a reason.
I literally had a writer friend. She was like, oh, I am a writer. I'd seen so much of her work that she put out on like so many different, you know, mediums on the internet. And she was, I think, sitting on this book for like a few years. And before she approached me, she was like, I can't do it. And I laughed because she had a comment on one of her posts that literally said from another human being, if you put all of your captions in a book, I would buy it. And it was the most ironic conversation because like, I was like, do you understand how that's like a sign? Yes. When another human comments something like that to you, that like, she was very much, and when I pointed her in that direction, I was like, so what's wrong with if there's a person, just even one in this entire world that's like, hey, you know what? If you put all of your captions in a book, it would be like a bedtime story for me, you know? Like I wouldn't go through that. But it's just like, it's things that we think in our head. And like back to what you were saying, it's the same thing about like grappling with that tapping into your voice, right? Where it's just like, people are like, what do I have to sound like for it to be considered good or considered this or that? Like whatever their kind of label is for when it's okay for them to like put something out in the world. Like, it's not okay, even though I think some of the best writing now, like in terms of popularity, is a lot of times people love reading the way that you speak. Like when they read something where it feels like you're talking to your girlfriend and like they can relate to that like themselves, they would rather that than like something where like the text feels like they have to go to like a dictionary and look up half of the words that you're mentioning because you think you need to make it some sort of elevated, work of art. And it's like art looks different these days too. Like,
I feel like we should be doing a writer's workshop right now. Like, to me, it's literally like, what should you write? What should you sound like? It's exactly what you're saying. It should sound like you. Done. Case point. But I wonder what it is. Is it that we're so in our head, that we're so afraid of judgment, that we're so afraid of what other people are going to say that stops us from actually putting it out there? Or how do we even get past that so that we can get past these fears? Because I think we all have something to say. We all have a voice. And even if we, like you said, even if we touch just one person, then it's worth it.
I agree. And I think it might be the fact that we have so many opinions accessible to us.
That's hard.
More than ever before. And I think sometimes even people will look at other people's posts where they're being dragged in the comments potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And there's almost like a secondhand fear of like, what if I put something out on the internet and they don't like me like this too? And it's just like people will see examples of people being dragged essentially, not even if they've said something wrong, which like that's a whole other conversation, but just because, and I see this in video, actually, this doesn't even exclusively, apply to writing. People will post their like happy relationship video or something, and there'll be like 20 comments in there from someone being like, I don't know, you're ugly, your partner is ugly, what's with that age difference? You should be ashamed of yourself. What does your mom think of this relationship? And it's just like, there's a culture of be yourself, but also like there's this side of the internet where like, as I like have said before, I'm very grateful that most of my experiences have been pretty positive, but a lot of people have seen so many things and it's almost like a collective shaming where it's just like, you can do this or that or the other, but like also, there's going to be this person or that person on a Reddit thread saying something about you. And I think there's like a whole mindset about putting yourself out on the internet anywhere and being like developing almost that skin or that like energetic barrier where you're like, actually, you know what? This person can say that. These 2 comments could be mean to me or whatever. But look at all of these, like, I don't know, other people who are saying very nice things about me and who are saying, oh my God, I loved your last video or I loved your last podcast episode. It blew my mind. It was great. It was wonderful. And it's just like, I think you have to put yourself out there repeatedly. And sometimes have someone say in the comments, I don't like you, your hair is brown and I don't like, my ex-girlfriend had brown hair and I don't like you, like it might not even have anything to do with what you're actually saying. And so putting yourself out there and like almost, I think in that way, healing kind of wounds that maybe had really come up in childhood, like around that like lack of acceptance potentially, or something that happened at school where like, we all kind of have those like moments where it's just like, you're like, this is happening now, but it actually has to do with something that happened to me, way back when. And like my work felt rejected or I felt rejected and my work is personal to me. So it feels very activating when someone says something to me and it's like, oh, I don't like that. Like if somebody were to probably tell me in the beginning, I don't like how you write, I may have gone to the corner and cried about it a little bit, like when I first started, like, why don't you like me? Like this is so personal to my art. You don't like my art. And it's just like, that's like your inner child really, going on like that tangent and like needing to be, witnessed in that moment, I think. But it's just like, I had to keep putting myself out there generally to kind of develop this. it is a confidence, because it's just like the more you do something and the more you see it through and you make commitments to yourself and you're like, I love writing, or I love my creativity, I love sharing it with the world. And then showing up for yourself when you say that. And you're like, actually, my inner voice, my authentic voice, like I'm fighting to make that heard because I deserve to be heard. And the people who, resonate with that message, they deserve to have that connection with me, like they deserve to hear that message too. We're supposed to find each other. And it's just like, to me, there's no other way of doing it without prioritizing it and like consistently kind of feeling into what does it feel when I'm actually tapped into my voice. And this is me. And I'm not like saying anything because, I scrolled through Instagram and saw 7 posts and I was like, that sounds nice. I should put that out there.
Yeah.
It's like, no, this is me.
I love that you said that. And we have to build it up. I mean, for me, even with this podcast, like you're saying, there's been some random comments like on YouTube that have been off the wall. Like these people will say like, who cares what you have to say? Or there was this one that was so good. Like, what this shit or something, some like ridiculous thing, like not even in like so improper. And then so like you'll go just like like you said, that inner child of you hurts. It's like oh, it's like a dagger to the heart. And then I go in and I look, I'm like, okay, you're not my audience. Like you're a gamer sitting in a dark room playing World of Warcraft, whatever. I don't know. I'm not a gamer. Like this is about the female voice, finding your voice, about your authentic. Like we could be on different planes. So why am I going to let this comment haunt me? Yet it will still haunt me. So I think we have to look at the origins of what these comments are. And people are so much more prone to comment negatively because they have that screen again to protect them about anything and everything, whether it's a book, whether it's a video, all of that stuff. It's so easy to put the negative comments out there, and very few people actually, I find, put the supportive comments out there. So you have to understand that for every negative comment you get, or every dislike, or every unfollow, there's probably 5 or 6 silent yeses out there. And even like coming from Hollywood, it's like, you can't really judge my writing that much and hurt me. You learn really, really quick. There's a lot of chefs in that kitchen. You don't get attached to much. You write it. Okay. You don't like it. I'll change that word. Like there's 50 other ways I can write this. So that part doesn't, but it's, it's the comments that tend to hit you. I think you are onto something. That inner child hits you in that rejection zone. It's not like, okay, you didn't like that phrase. It's like, oh, that felt personal. And I think that's where we get the hangups.
It's exactly that. And I will never forget this one comment that I got, because like I had written like a very poetic piece or something like that. And there was one line where like the piece itself actually had nothing to do with God. But I think it was something like when I was referring to an inner voice, I was like, oh, like in the way that like God's voice, something like that. Something the line had to do with something like that. But the post overall, nothing to do with God. And this one man who obviously a lot of times is people who don't even follow you, who are like super random out of nowhere. And he comments in the most angry way because like I remember it was a paragraph, but like the only thing I really remember was like, he's like, you can't hear God's voice. No one can hear God's voice. God doesn't talk because God doesn't exist. And he went on a whole tangent in my comment, and in my comment section. And I say that just to illustrate where it's just like, clearly this person has some sort of religious trigger, like unresolved issues, something like that. And they're literally just spewing it in my comment section. And it has nothing to do with me. And that's really what it is. It has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with me. They're literally working out some sort of trauma, okay, that they got in Sunday school or something like that. And they're now putting it, instead of speaking to a therapist about it, they're putting it in my comment section. And it's like, I'm not going to go and like be like, you really didn't like my poetry? Like, really? Like, what did I do wrong? Because I think that's where that's the question that we ask sometimes when we think, either something wasn't received well or like we judge something as a failure. We're like, oh, if this person didn't like it or they left a mean comment, what did I do wrong? And we get all tender with it. And we ask that question because we take it as like you said, very personal. And so we're like, okay, so what can I do differently? And then we look around for like cues or things that we see that are like accepted by people in the outside world. And we're like, okay, if this gets a sticker or a check mark, then it's safe. I can speak this way. I can post art this way. I can do things this way. And that's okay. But I can't do it my way because this one guy in the comments this one time said that I suck. And that felt unsafe.
And that's where we lose our voice. And that's where we lose art. And that's where we lose our sense of expression, as opposed to looking at it as we can turn it around and being like, I was just doing a public service. I was allowing this guy to vent and deal with whatever BS trauma he has. And it has nothing to do with us. But instead we take it personally and we stifle ourselves. And those little moments add up so that we get to a point where we just are copying everyone and we're losing our own voice. And then we're not going to resonate with anyone. So it's just like, it doesn't do anyone any well. And honestly, that guy that wrote that weird comment probably forgot about it. Like, and here we are talking about it. You know, that's the funniest thing. Like, they probably wrote it in a drunken stupor, passed out, and they never thought about it again. And yet 2 years later, we're talking about it here on a podcast.
You must be so proud. But what I was going to say was that it's literally, as like, I've had people message me and say, oh my gosh, Bea, I've been posting. I'm so discouraged because every time I post, I lose followers. And I was like, okay, and what? Like, what is the problem? I'm not sure I gather. She's like, well, I'm so discouraged. I don't want to keep posting. And I'm like, well, why? And he's like, well, if people unfollow me, that means they don't like what I'm putting out. And I was like, okay, so one person didn't like the way you wrote that, or maybe they literally unfollowed you for like 100 other reasons that have nothing to do with, you know, the specific post that you put out there. But like, yeah, as you're refining your voice and like what you care about, people are dropping off all the time. Yeah. Because maybe they don't care about the same thing that you care about. And it actually has nothing to do with, you know, what you wrote specifically. They're like, hey, I actually, you know what? I don't care about female empowerment, you know, like women suck. I'm gonna unfollow you. Yeah, like I thought you wrote about like, you know,
I thought you were hot and you're gonna talk about women. Yeah, like screw you now. Like,
yeah. And so like, you know, for me, I'm just like, as the more you're refining like what you're about, especially like when you're trying to figure it out, and like maybe that's like a longer period of trying to figure it out, like that, I think we should be experimenting. I feel like if you're not experimenting, then like, you know, there's maybe a problem. Maybe you should start experimenting. You should start seeing like, you know, what do you want to write about? What sets, you know, if you've been writing the same thing over and over again, or if you've been talking about the same topics and you're super bored, I guarantee you that other people will also feel bored. Like, because they feel that from you. Like,
if you're bored with yourself, they're bored with you.
Exactly. And so it's just like, I feel like sometimes people are like, they feel caged in because they're like, I've talked about this for potentially, I don't know, a year. And this person and all these people, they gave me all these hearts, all these emojis, all of these follows. And so that means this is approved content. Very weird kind of censorship. And so, and if I want to change, or if I actually feel that none of this is authentic to me, and I've just been, you know, either in a different season of my life where I didn't know it was authentic, you know, I had an aha moment and I was like, I don't actually care for this. I won't change because I am now terrified that I'm going to lose whatever thing that I've built in my head as like being important. And for a lot of people on social media, if they're like, 2 people unfollowed me, oh my gosh. And it's like, okay, clap. That's great. Because 2 people decided in their like very sovereign ability to decide that for whatever reason, your content and them were not a match. And then 2 other people found you and they were like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. And it's just like, well, don't you want those connections of people who will like look at you authentically and you're like, oh my God, you're the best thing ever. Like, I love that. And so it's just like, you have 2 options where it's just like, if you're continuously trying to chase some sort of algorithm or numerical value that you think is very important in your head, then what you sacrifice there is your authenticity. And then, well, what are you really building? People who are not very much actually invested in what you truly want to put out in the world. And that's scary. So even spending all that time continuing to pour your energy into something that now has like come to your awareness that like isn't for you anymore. That's much scarier to me than starting something over if that's what I'm feeling called to do and like speak about something else. And then have some people decide, hey, actually, I don't really care about this. So, nice to know you, but also goodbye. And like, that's great. That's awesome.
Yeah, we have to release ourselves from the handcuffs of the follows and the likes. And it's really hard. And then we put ourselves in these little boxes and we become hostage to all of that stuff as opposed to allowing ourselves to grow. And our opinions are going to change. What we talk about, what we write about is going to change with the seasons of our life. I mean, I literally probably have so many unfollows because of this one video I put on YouTube. It's one of my most watched videos. It's really funny. It says go barefoot. And I'm talking about like grounding and grounding like in your home. And literally, I swear, I probably get the creepiest men watching this with all these foot fetishes. It's like, I joke around that it's like my own little personal OnlyFans because it's like, I get all these weird comments that are like, ooh, what are you really barefoot? Because I don't even show my feet or anything. It's like, there's like this like whole foot fetish, like following I get from that. And it's like, if they watch any of my other content, they're not getting what they want. They didn't even get my feet in that video. So I'm probably getting a lot of unfollows from people that are like, yes, I want to follow her for that. It's okay. They're not my people.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. But like, and that's what you said that's like so important because you said it was like one of your most watched videos. And I feel like people see what is like their most viral content. And then they're like, oh my God, I should make my whole profile just only content like this. And then it's like, but like, wait, what are you doing? What are you doing? Because like, there's so many reasons why something could go viral. Yeah. Like you said, in this particular video, it's the feet. Even though it has nothing to do with, like, your feet aren't even in the video.
It's not even in it. Oh, so weird.
And so, like, if you posted, like, a breakup video randomly because you were going through a breakup, but your whole channel is, like, I don't know, travel photography, and you love travel photography, but you see that this one breakup video you made went viral, are you telling me that you should now exclusively post breakup content and ditch your travel photography lifestyle, whatever content you built up because that's what you care about? Like, it's maybe an extreme example, but that is how it happens, right? Like that like dopamine hit where you're like, oh my God, all these people like me. And then so your brain takes it as signals where it's just like people start curating things and then they just completely lose themselves along the way. And you got to come back to like why you started in the first place. I mean, like that I think a lot of people come to, the internet because like, I want some sort of free self-expression. I want something like that. And then what are you doing when you decide like, actually, I'm going to make myself the least free I've ever been because I'm actually now building my life around the validation of strangers, not my family, not my teacher, not my like friend from grade school who said something like mean to me or whatever. Like now it's even worse because now your whole, like everything you do is now being curated based on strangers. Like they actually don't have any real, like connection to your actual life or care about you the way that, we have like opinions from people who are closest to us. And I think it's like, it goes back to what I said before, where it's like, we give people in like our lives like flack about this. We're like, this person didn't support me. This friend didn't think that was whatever. But like, do we see how now in this day and age, like a lot of times random strangers on the internet can be the thing that kind of gets you to like step out of your own voice and step away from your own authentic way of sharing.
Do you think we have freedom of our voice anymore and freedom of expression? Or do you think we're so handcuffed and curated that we don't even realize it?
I think that in the majority of the situations, at some point or another, when you're sharing on social media, and like this may, ebb and flow as you like go through the journey and like maybe certain realizations come up, I don't actually think that we are free.
Yeah, me neither.
Because it's like you get slapped, metaphorically, if you don't say the right thing, or like, the numbers will reflect poorly on what you've said. And you're going to feel bad about it, potentially, especially if you don't notice this dynamic. And you're going to want to recreate over and over again things that are safe. And so safe doesn't necessarily mean that that's authentic to you. So like, you notice how many profiles are private on the internet? Where I'm like, it's not always personal profiles. There's a lot of creator profiles that I see. And it's just like, this person's like, oh, their bio is like, I'm a creator, writer, whatever. And it's just like, you can clearly see it's, like some sort of, business account, or was at one point a business account, and it's all private. And I'm like, I wonder why that is.
Yeah. It just makes me think, back in the day before the internet and before the social media, aging myself here, but even like way back, way back, I feel like there was more freedom of expression because one, you weren't faced with your audience's response as quickly, or as widely. And you could just speak your voice a little bit more, and it becomes a lot harder today to do that, I think. So I don't totally think we are free to speak our voice. I think we feel very...
If you remember like the websites that you can make back in the day, like at the same time as MySpace was a thing, you could like make websites and like post pictures and things like, and like the only people who were commenting on these websites, I think the only was it Pixo? I can't remember, but it was like friends from school and like things like that, where it's just like, I feel like people were so much more comfortable, even just like having people that they knew, which like that adds an element to it. But like they were like all over, like posting whatever they wanted. It was such a cringy time of the internet, but like great, love it. Versus now, when you go into like, sometimes I'll watch a YouTube video that I love and I'll go into the comment section and I'm like, whew, okay, 3 comments in, I'm out. Like, I don't know, like I can't, I can't read this because I'm like, oh my gosh, like what is this? Like, what compels you people to say things like this? And I'm like, I loved it. It was great. But you know what? I'm guilty. I didn't comment. I was like, this was a great video. Gave it a thumbs up. But I didn't go in there and say, I'm really sorry. I don't know if all these people are on crack, but this was a great video. Like, bye.
Yeah. It's that group think. It's that group mentality, that group consciousness. And it's just kind of like, I'm sad that we've gotten so far from being authentic and individual in our way of thinking. But, more power to you. And you're so brave to do that and put yourself out there. So how do we follow with you, along with you, to get more of your beautiful writing and to learn from you? Because I know you help teach others how to write as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm on Instagram, The Guided Word, and my book is also available for purchase on Amazon if you don't like the internet and you don't also want to go through, I actually, there's a decent amount of people who are like, I deactivated Instagram, but like, I will read your book. and like have it on my coffee table. And I'm like, that it does feel like this very personal medium. So I'm there, post stories, I'm, all up in it. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
I love it. I really feel like we had a little mini writer's workshop today. So I love that we got to connect. Thank you so much for joining me and having this conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. Like, I honestly, the whole time I felt like, when you have like a few conversations where like, we have to force things. We do not have to force anything.
No,
like,
I felt like we could have kept going. I'm like, okay, we got to wrap up. We'll have to come back again. We'll do another one.
Sure. Agreed. Oh my gosh. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And that's it for today's Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Bea Vasic, for the beautiful guided conversation all about writing and stepping into our authenticity. If you want to work with Bea, get her book, or do any of her courses, I'll put all the information in the show notes below. And as always, you can find Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers and Intentional Media on our website at CourtneyMyers.com. That's where you'll find our books, our courses, and everything else we have coming out soon. I'll talk to you later. Bye.